Now, the Asset Publisher is a really cool widget that we can use in Liferay that allows us to either manually or dynamically display different kinds of assets in a list form. Okay, so I mentioned in the previous video there that we can go and create what are called self-publishing pages out of basically pages with the Asset Publisher on them. And we can go ahead and do that for the Livingston Hotels and Resorts as well. Okay, Livingston may have some use cases on multiple sites where we need to have content that needs to be updated regularly, or blogs in the case of Livingston Life. Okay, if we even go back to the news structure that we created, if Livingston wanted to basically provide a page where we can have news regularly updating on the page, there are basically two options for doing this. Either one, they can manually update the page every time a new news article is created, or what they can do is they can essentially create a self-publishing page by adding an asset publisher, configuring it to specifically target the news article, and have those published whenever they've gone through the workflow, been reviewed, and also been edited. Okay. So we're going to actually look at an example for Livingston Life, because the Livingston Life site is intended to be sort of a replacement for their journal. Okay, the Livingston Life journal has a lot of travel information, has a lot of tips and tricks for how to do travel, how to enjoy travel, things like things that you need to make sure you pack on the go, what kind of locations are for different kinds of people, different things like that. Okay, so basically the intention of that site will be to have blogs that are being regularly published. Again, it will help with our SEO, help make sure that people can sort of see Livingston, see them as sort of the authority on travel. And they can also get some really good tools, tips, and tricks, whether or not they're going to a Livingston hotel and resort. Okay, so we can actually use the Asset Publisher to make sure that those blogs are being dynamically published as they're coming in for the Livingston Life site. Okay, all right. Now, let's go ahead and look at how the Asset Publisher configuration works. Okay. When we have an asset publisher on the page, there are two options. Like I've mentioned, there's manual, and this allows you to select specific content from a list, or there's dynamic, and dynamic allows you to set up some filters so that the asset publisher is only publishing specific kinds of assets with specific metadata, or using specific structures or document types, okay, depending on what asset we are choosing. All right, so these are the filters that we have available to us. There's source, filter. We will see custom user attributes, but I'll explain that in a second. Ordering and grouping, and display settings. Okay, so source allows us to choose the asset that we want to display, or assets. We can choose more than one, and from what site they are displayed from. Okay. All right, now what's important to know about this is actually one of the ways in which we can do some content sharing across a site hierarchy. If I'm a site administrator for the Livingston Hotels and Resorts and the other sites under that site hierarchy, what I can do here is I can actually choose to display content from the parent site or from a different child site, different things like that. There are some potential issues with that if you're going to use staging, and I'll talk about that in one of the later chapters in more detail. But keep that in mind. In general, it's probably still a good practice to just take advantage of the global site. Okay. So source allows us to choose which assets we want to display and from where. Filter allows us to modify or be more specific about which assets are on display based on metadata. So that could be tags, categories, but that could also be structures or document types depending on whether or not we're using web content or documents. Okay. Now the custom user attribute section is actually a dud. We have it in here for what it was. But we don't actually use this anymore. It's just not been removed from the widget. So don't worry about that one. You can just sort of scratch that out in your mind. All right. Ordering and grouping allows us to, of course, order and group our content. Surprise, surprise. It allows us to determine what kinds of things we want to order by: title, date, metadata, author, etc. Okay. And then there's the display settings that allow us to choose how these filtered contents are going to be displayed. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to add our asset publisher to our Livingston Life page, and we're going to set up the configuration, not add any content yet. We'll get to that a little bit later, so that we can basically set it up in preparation for our regularly published blogs that will be coming in, and we'll look at that in a later chapter. So let's go ahead and look at setting this up together. All right. So I left off here in the Livingston Resort site at Barcelona. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up the menu. All right, make sure you're logged in if you are not already. Click on the site selector. Okay, click on My Sites. And again, that site selector will be in the site administration panel. Okay, I'm going to trust that you guys know where that is from this point forward. And go ahead and click on the Livingston Life. All right, so first we need to actually create a home page. Now we're just going to do a basic widget page for the home page here so that we can set it up to have our asset publisher. Okay, so go ahead and click on the Add button here in the Pages section. Go ahead and click on Widget Page. And let's name it Home. Okay, go ahead and click on Submit. All right, and to get there quickly, we can just do Options and View next to our home page. Okay. Wow, look at that beautiful page. Yes, there's nothing on it yet, but that's okay. So we're going to go ahead and configure this page so it is a single column so that we can focus on those blogs that we're going to get here in a later section. Okay. So click on Configure Page. We've seen this before. And click on the one column option. Okay. We can go ahead and click Save. All right, now we're going to add an asset publisher to our newly configured page. Click on the Add button at the top right. Click on Widgets. Okay. And let's go to Highlighted and drag the asset publisher to the page. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and configure our asset publisher so that it will display our blogs in a future section that we will work towards. Okay. So click on the Options menu next to the asset publisher and go ahead and click on Configuration. All right. We will see our asset selection section here. Okay. We'll see that dynamic or manual option. Go ahead and click to open up Source. Open up the asset type section here, and we can go from any to blogs entry, which will be at the very bottom of the list there. Okay. All right, we can go ahead and expand the ordering and grouping section as well. We want to go ahead and choose order by publish date. So go ahead and choose that drop down and change it to publish date. Okay. All right, and then we can go ahead and click Save. All right, so right now we're going to go ahead and display the blogs entries, make sure that they are ordered by publish date. If we wanted to, we could open up filter here and add some new filters, add some new rules. Okay, so this is all some new things that we can do here. Okay, you'll see the display settings, which we'll get to later. This will determine how we can display all of the content that we are filtering. So we can do abstracts, we can do full content. As we'll see later, we can add new display templates. We can also choose if it's going to be the full content. We can choose how many will show up, if we want to set up pagination, etc., etc. So we'll build on this as we continue on. But for now, what this does is it gives us the starting point to make sure that our blogs will be automatically updating on the front page for Livingston Life. So let's go ahead and recap what we just talked about with the asset publisher. Okay. With the asset publisher, we can automate the content publishing process. Again, from start to finish, this could be creating content, having it reviewed, making sure it's edited, and then once that's all done, instead of having to manually place it on a page, we can just simply have it automatically published. Okay. So that's the benefit of this. That's what I called the self-publishing page. So the example that I used earlier was the Livingston business requirements, having it so that we need news automatically publishing on the front page of Livingston Hotels and Resorts. So Maria or someone like Josiah could work together from Livingston to go ahead and set up an asset publisher there and configure it similarly to what we did with the Livingston Life site. Okay. The asset publisher can be manual or dynamic. If you do want that self-publishing page feature, you would want to make it dynamic. Okay. And there are a number of other options for filtering what kind of content can display and how you can display it. Okay. So that's really the best way to break down the asset publisher. The configuration is all about determining what, including the filters, and how, including potentially things like pagination or what metadata you want to show. Okay. So we'll continue to build on top of this as we continue on. So in the next section, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at adding special content display pages, which is going to be a little bit different from what we've seen in previous versions of Liferay. Okay, so stick around and we'll look at adding those specialized content display pages in the next video.